This is Parker Hesse. This is Sam Branks. You have the pleasure of listening to Hawkeyes and Tallboys. Cheers, motherfuckers.
Welcome to the Hawkeyes and Tallboys podcast, featuring your host, Bo Freeborn.
You know, guys, even though we get 2 conference losses, we're still going to end up 9-3. We're going to win the West, for sure.
Dylan Pond.
Here's the thing, fellas. I'm going with it. 12-0, baby. We're going to do it. Let's fucking go. Woo!
And Rob Wall.
I mean, that would be shocking. But we can do it. I mean, I think we can.
So crack a tall boy and go Hawks.
Welcome into another great episode of Hawkeyes and Tallboys. I'm Rob.
I'm Dylan.
And I'm Bo.
And today we have with us, all the way from Indianapolis, Jed Wilkinson. He is our Purdue guest this week. So cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks for joining, Jed.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
And I'd like to introduce Jed. He's got some pretty cool accolades. So he is an avid Purdue fan. He was a part of their marching band for 4 years. He's the board moderator for Gold and Black Illustrated, and he was actually the first live in-game DJ for a D1 sporting event in 2014 in Ross-Ade Stadium. So please welcome Jed Wilkinson.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely,
man. So tell us a little bit. You know, Jed, how long you've been a fan of Purdue? Is it a lifelong thing? Did it start when you went to school?
So, long story short, moved to West Lafayette when I was 4 in 1988. All of my sisters before me went to Purdue, and I'm the youngest of 4, and all of us went to Purdue. And growing up here locally, it was kind of, one of those things where, with the Big Ten school, you grow up in the town and you just kind of become a fan. So. Luckily, we moved away from Champaign, so I'm not an Illinois fan. Yeah. And so moved to West Lafayette, became a huge Boilermaker fan. Was here from 2002 to 2008. Yes, the best 6 years of my life. Spent 4 years in the marching band and had a chance to be the drum major for a year. That 2004 year where, we're this close to kind of breaking through, and then as everybody kind of knows, the Orton fumble, that play that shall not be reminisced, kind of similar to the Elite Eight with Virginia from a couple years ago. We kind of don't want to talk about those plays as Purdue fans, but no, just a lifelong fan. I'm sure as you guys as Hawkeye fans know, it's sort of just part of your life, part of your blood, and it's fellow sort of gold and black brethren, and I appreciate you guys having me. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We're excited to have you. So
perfect. And we got another question for you, Jed. What weapons on this Purdue football team should we be aware of?
Well, obviously it kind of begins and ends with a guy you guys are probably really familiar with, in David Bell, who was, came down to Iowa or Purdue and kind of surprised a lot of people nationally when he chose Purdue over Iowa. You kind of look at this team right now. If Iowa's got a guy like David Bell at the wide receiver position, that's a weapon with when you add in with that defense. But kind of starts and ends with David Bell. A guy that when you're looking at is already over 2,000 career receiving yards in just over 2.5 years.
Just versus Iowa alone, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Receiving yards.
I think 195 and 130 or something like that the last 2 years. 4 total touchdowns, 5 total touchdowns, something like that.
Yeah.
Kind of likes to stick to the Hawkeyes a little bit there.
He does. I've noticed.
But Purdue's down a bunch of weapons this week. They lost Alexander Horvath earlier in the year to a broken leg. He's not quite healed back up. Just announced that Jacquez Cross, true freshman running back, who's probably the quickest of the backs, is stepping away for an undisclosed amount of time due to a family or some other kind of personal issue. And And then the wide receivers are taking a big hit as well. Milton Wright is another big weapon, but Yassine, Abdur Rahman Yassine is hurt. Marcellus Moore, the track star, who is incredibly fast but kind of diminutive. He's out. He's in the transfer. He kind of one of those guys that hopped in the transfer portal, hopped back out 2 hours later, and then the next day was kind of back in.
Yeah.
So it kind of starts and ends with David Bell. I mean, if Bell doesn't have a big game, doesn't go for 150 and 2 touchdowns.
Well, as we remember from last year, he had 13 for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, but we can jump into all of that when we get a little bit further into our Purdue preview. So thanks for kind of going over that with us, Jed. But first, guys, we do need to go back and look at last week's matchup against the Penn State Nittany Lions. We do need to do a recap of that game. Iowa actually squeaked it out 23-20. Some quick hitters there. Petrus was 17 for 31, 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Our defense had 4 interceptions. I'll toss it down to you, Bo. What were your thoughts in this game, and were you at the game?
No, I wasn't. Unfortunately, I watched it from a wedding that I was in. Which
wait, hold up. I thought us Hawkeyes and Tallboys were fully on board with banning fall weddings. So please elaborate your decision there, Bo.
Yeah, I was forced to go in, and if my buddy Neto is listening, sorry, bro. Like I had to do it for him. He was in my wedding, and Rob, I want to also say, hilarious transition. Jed started talking about a ton of injuries, and then we go into the Penn State game talking about the injuries
Speaking
there.
of,
So nice little transition you had there. But hey, defense. It came down to defense, and the Hawks looked incredible on defense, and they squeaked out enough on offense to score that final touchdown to go up by 3. What a gutsy performance. A lot of people are saying, hey, what would have happened if Sean Clifford would have stayed in the full game? Who knows? It was 17-10 when he left, down 7 before halftime. So we'll see what happens. I think Sean Clifford's a great quarterback, and I think that he burned us quite a bit on the ground. But just to say that he would have made a huge difference and Iowa would have got blown out in the game, no. But here's the deal: is Iowa's number 2 team in the country, 6-0, undefeated, going up against a Purdue team this week. Great game last week. Glad we got the win. Bill?
Yeah, no, I like what you were saying there, Bo, because as talking for Penn State fans here, you could sit there and play that if and but game all day long. But what good is that going to do you? Shut up and move on to Ohio State. Like
Also, they only have 1 conference loss. They go through and they win out. We'll play them in the Big Ten title game. I mean, it's right there. So,
exactly.
Game's over.
We talked about that with our Penn State guest last week, where we kind of came to the realization where it's obviously not a no-lose situation necessarily. It's just whoever loses the game makes their road to get into the playoff or get into the Big Ten championship just a little bit harder. So, I mean, Penn State, obviously a hell of a football team, and they still have, the rest of the season in front of them. But,
yeah,
and what I hate hearing that, if Sean Clifford didn't get hurt, we would have won that game by 3 touchdowns. You're telling me Phil Parker wouldn't have made any adjustments at halftime? Right. Like, they said the same thing. Oh, well, yeah, you guys got smoked in the first half versus Colorado State. Like, okay, yeah, you're down, 7 points going into that second half. Like, if anybody actually believes Iowa got smoked in that first half, no, they simply made adjustments and came out and did something different. So absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. However, my thoughts on Iowa, what matters is I totally echo what Bo was saying. The defense played outstanding. You heard it all week long from Penn State fans. Oh, Sean Clifford's not going to turn the ball over 4 times. Yeah, he didn't because he got knocked out of the game. And before, I take any flack for Iowa's defense being dirty necessarily. It's like, no, when you have a mobile quarterback, that's the risk you take. And you go up against, quite possibly the nation's best linebacker in Jack Campbell, that result's not going to end well for 9 out of 10 quarterbacks. And obviously, it sucks to see him get injured, but the play was clean, everything else. So don't want to ramble on too much about that. And then my last point is we've given Brian Ferentz his fair share amount of hate on this podcast for play calling and, directions and decisions and that sort of thing. How about him just holding that play action bomb just in his back pocket? He just had it in his back pocket all day long. He's like, we might need that at some point. So let's not throw it in. No need. the game's close. Defense is playing well, no need. And then, okay, we get ourselves in a little situation, down 3, fourth quarter, then wham. My God, that touchdown came into our corner of the end zone. And I'm sure you guys have seen it on Twitter all week long. The decibel meters in that place is out of control. I've seen as high as 128 in that north end zone, which don't quote me on this, but I thought I saw somebody on Twitter say that's 5 points above, severe hearing damage. So absolute pandemonium in that north end zone. It was like a 3-row wide group hug. Oh, it was absolute pandemonium. That being said, in the words of Bill Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati. Slightly west, we're on to West Lafayette.
What's crazy too is that not only was that game sold out, Iowa-Purdue is sold out. Iowa-Minnesota just got sold out. And I'm pretty sure Wisconsin's already sold out. That's at Madison. But one more game left, Iowa-Illinois, that hasn't been sold out. What I'm getting at is we're going to hear a lot of noise in the crowd this weekend, again, with it being homecoming and a sold-out crowd.
Hell yeah. So, and then the only other big point I had from that Penn State game is, again, we talk about how well the defense played. Iowa held Penn State, a pretty damn tough offense overall, to 3 points in the second half. That's absolutely incredible with the weapons that they have on their offensive side of the ball. And I don't care who's throwing their playmakers the ball. It's obviously the quarterback's a big part of it. Don't get me wrong, but I thought their backup came in and was serviceable, moving with his legs, and just wasn't very accurate. And I think a big part of that was the crowd noise that got to him a little bit there too. So hell yeah. Overall, we got the win, and we're on to West Lafayette. We're on to Purdue.
Absolutely. And a great game played by Penn State. Obviously, they can't help injuries that happens like that. But just so you know, in order to see them later, in the Big Ten championship, for instance, they still have to go through Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. So all three still on the docket. We talked about it last week, but they have a heck of a schedule this year. And so we'll see what goes on there. But thanks for bearing with us, Jed, through that little recap of last week. But we do want to get into this Saturday's matchup against Purdue. It's going to be at 2:30 at Kinnick Stadium, another home game. Last year, we actually lost to Purdue 24-20. And I mentioned that performance that was by David Bell, which is the 13 receptions for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. And last year, guys, hopefully we don't repeat it this year, but last year they looked like they could just pass whenever they wanted, wherever they wanted. So I'd like to talk to Jed about this year's team. What's your thoughts on this year's Purdue team?
So leading into the year, there's a lot of news nationally about Jeff Brom's defensive staff, and pretty much released everybody from that defensive staff. One of his holdovers from his first year here, Anthony Poindexter, took off. He's now at Penn State, actually, is there, one of their safeties and defensive backs coaches. But everybody else on that staff is 100% brand new. Brought in Ron English from Florida, Mark Hagan from Texas, and really the guy calling the plays now on the defensive side is Brad Lambert, who was the defensive coordinator at Marshall, was up for that coaching job there. And, his defenses at Marshall the last 2 or 3 years have been top 15 type defenses. And so really coming into the season, all the question marks were with the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of people thought, if the defense can just be okay, just average, because the defense had been so terrible the last, the 2 years prior, Purdue's got a chance here to kind of, maybe sneak into that 2-3 range in the West. Maybe we kind of thought Wisconsin might be, real good this year. You guys obviously real strong. And so far this year, defense has been wonderful. And the big question so far now is who's playing quarterback? That's kind of been the continuing theme for Brom over his 5 years in West Lafayette is, cannot quite develop, cannot quite get a quarterback to stick. Obviously last year, Aiden O'Connell kind of tore you guys up there, throwing the ball, David Bell going for, over about 120, 130 yards total, and 3 total touchdowns. But Jack Plummer was thought to have seized that job this year, and it just underwhelmed. Just dink and dunk, nothing down the field. O'Connell kind of comes in and leads them to a game-winning drive against Illinois. He gets the start against Minnesota, and really the issues that have kind of reared their head for Purdue is the offense in the red zone. I think they're the worst or the second worst team in the Big Ten in red zone efficiency and scoring. Just it can push the ball, and get inside that 20, and then they just settle in for field goals. Can't get the ball in. So that's kind of the probably the big thing right now is just who's going to play quarterback. A lot of people are thinking O'Connell's going to start. Some other people thinking Plummer's going to start, and there's even some sort of rumbles of third stringer by a kid named Austin Burton, who's a transfer from UCLA, probably the most athletic of the quarterbacks. He's probably going to definitely get some more snaps than he has in the past. He's got a package, and Braun came out this week and said he knows the whole offense. He's been here for 2 years. He can run the whole offense. So that was a little bit of a tip to me, just kind of following stuff along where, Burton might get the sniff. He was slated to start against IU last year. And then obviously Purdue had some COVID issues, couldn't get that game played, but Burton was going to start that game to kind of see what he could do. But the offense has been, you think Jeff Brom, you think the Browns, and you think, potent offenses, and this offense has just been, by and large, disappointing and underwhelming. A lot of that has to do with a lack of a run game. And that kind of starts up front. Purdue has some good pieces. Gus Hartwig is a true sophomore, started for him last year. He's playing center, and they've got some good pieces that have transferred in. Tyler Witt from Western Kentucky, and another guy, Greg Long, who transferred in from, I think, UTEP or UTSA. I can't remember. It might have been UTEP. And those guys have been really, really good, but the left guard and the right tackle, specifically Eric Miller this year, has just really, really struggled. Run blocking, he's solid. He's okay. But, man, he really struggles in the pass pro. Has given up a lot of hurries, given up some sacks, some untimely sacks there. But then other times he looks like a world beater. And you're like, what do you do? It's sort of this night and day type of thing where the offense will come out, looks really good for a drive or two, and then just can't do anything kind of sometimes in the second half until they're starting to scramble and so forth. But the big, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as an Iowa fan, it's sounding more and more positive for our D line to finally pad some stats, because our defensive line doesn't have a whole lot of sacks. They do a really good job, like Dylan always says, containing and doing their job. And whereas this week it sounds more and more evident the way you're talking with injuries and then the lack of great plays that our defensive line is going to have a lot of fun this weekend.
Yeah, I think Iowa could probably find some success bringing their linebackers. Purdue's really kind of struggled picking up blitzes, specifically through the inside. If you go back in that Minnesota game, really struggled picking up the blitz on the interior, especially delayed blitzes. And O'Connell is, if he starts, you want to blitz him because he is, you might as well put the statue of Johnny Unitas back there. He's not moving. He's just, he can't move. And so that's kind of the hope with Austin Burton, kind of throwing him in there. But it's one of those things where, if Burton's in there, he's likely to be running the ball because O'Connell's, he can't do it.
But to your point, what an awesome weekend to have Burton in there, right? Because Iowa traditionally struggled against running quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
The guy could throw it, knows the offense. Would be, you would think, an advantage. Although, as you alluded to earlier, O'Connell torched Iowa last year. So there's kind of a flip of the script there. But we all know that Kirk Ferentz has been preparing for 2, if not 3 quarterbacks, especially knowing that our defense has knocked out the starting quarterback 5 out of the last 6 weeks.
And it is interesting. Like this Purdue Boiler team, like they're 3-2, but their 2 losses have come to at number 12 Notre Dame, and then they just recently lost to Minnesota. But O'Connell threw for 371 yards, which is his high on the season. So I'm surprised that 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 they lost that game, but I didn't get a chance to see it, so I'm not sure, what exactly they look like.
Just settling for field goals. I mean, Purdue is, honestly, a couple plays from 5-0. I mean, they're honestly a couple plays from 5-0 and probably ranked 22nd, 23rd or so.
Wow.
So yeah, it's close. It's just, can they get over that hump? Can they get over that hump and start scoring touchdowns? If they can do that, they'll give you guys some problems. I think they'll give you guys some fits, but from what I can see, man, your defense is probably the best defense we'll see all year. And if we can have success against you guys, then, it bodes well for Purdue the rest of the season. So the issues in the Minnesota game for Purdue were that, they drive down, settle for field goals, and that's been kind of a common theme ever since the Notre Dame game, where the Notre Dame game, they had an opportunity to really kind of seize that game and settled for field goals. If they are able to put field goal or put touchdowns on the board, it puts Notre Dame in a bind. Obviously Jack Cohn has not played well really all year there for Notre Dame. They kind of squeaked by a really kind of poor Illinois team, kicking field goals, and finally scoring a touchdown there with about 4.5 minutes left. The same issues kind of rear their head again against Minnesota, where they're able to kind of drive the ball, settle for a field goal, drive the ball, settle for a field goal, and then with about 4 or 5 minutes left, they drive down, and Mitchell Finneran, who's been a wonderful addition from an FCS, who's FCS Kicker of the Year in the spring for Samford in his conference, comes in, misses his first one there late there in the fourth quarter, and so instead of it being 17-16, he ends up missing. So the key, probably one of the big keys is, for Purdue, not only for Iowa but really moving forward to get the bowl eligibility, is, are you going to be able to push the ball into the end zone for touchdowns? You can't win games in the Big Ten kicking field goals. This isn't the 70s or 80s Big Ten. You're talking, this is big boy football, and you're not going to win big boy football kicking field goals.
So in terms of the defense, I know we talked a lot about offense here. How good is this Purdue defense? Is it something that, obviously you look at their game against Notre Dame, they held them to only 27 points. Obviously they lost, but I mean, is this a solid defense and a defense that Iowa needs to be worried about running the ball or even throwing the ball?
Yeah. So surprise, I kind of mentioned earlier, sort of the surprise so far has been this new defensive staff moving away from the unmitigated disaster of Bob Diaco last year and bringing in his terrible 3-4 bend but don't break defense. Hagen and Lambert and English have really brought in a really attack-oriented and aggressive 4-3 defense. That really kind of lends itself to the personnel that Purdue has. It starts right there up front with blue chip, defensive end George Karlaftis, who's kind of tabbed as a first-round pick. I'm not sure anybody in the country has as much quarterback pressures and hurries as he does. Only has 1.5 sacks. That's been sort of his bugaboo. He hasn't been able to finish those. But you go back, he's getting double team, triple team. Heck, I've seen a couple plays where he's got 4 guys on him, where he's had a tight end, a guard, a tackle, and a running back chipping. So the defense is really, really solid. You're talking about the 14th total defense in the country. Not far off from Illinois when you're looking at stats. You're talking 8th in scoring defense, 26th third down conversion. The 5th in first downs allowed. Better than Iowa actually in first downs allowed. They're only allowing about 125 yards rushing a game and 175 passing a game. So, this is probably Purdue's best defense since that real vaunted defense that they had in 2002 to 2004 when they were putting guys in the NFL. So as a Purdue fan, a lot of fans are pretty frustrated because you sit here and you get Jeff Brom and you think offense is taken care of. We can finally figure out the defense. We figure out the special teams. And now we're kind of wetting the bed a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. But it kind of starts and ends there again with George Karlaftis. He is just an absolute monster on the defensive end. Probably the best defensive player we've had at Purdue since Ryan Kerrigan. who's a first-round draft pick and has been, kind of a stalwart there for Washington. Just that kind of a guy that can, when he wants to and he's able to, can win you a ball game. If you think back a number of years ago when Kerrigan played against Ohio State, and he had two or three forced fumbles, recovered one, and had, I think he'd sacked Pryor, probably about 4 times in one game. George is that kind of player. I mean, George is an All-American, first-team All-American type of player, and he warrants that kind of attention. But to their credit, other guys on the line have stepped up. Branson Dean on the interior has been really, really good. Lawrence Johnson as well, along with transfer from IU. I think it's DeMarge Lewis. Those defensive tackles have really stepped up, but we still haven't quite gotten that opposing rush end. Jack Sullivan's kind of been real good. DeMarcus Mitchell has struggled, kind of been nicked up and hurt. He's supposed to be back, close to full health on Saturday. So I know your offensive line, I think, has struggled a little bit at times. I don't imagine us, trying to messing with it. Tyler Linderbaum. I think that's his name. Yeah, he's a stud. I mean, he's probably a first-round draft pick. He's probably an All-American at center. I think you guys kind of run right behind him left and run right behind him right. And I think that's kind of your rush attack right now. So if you don't give your tackles any help, George is going to have he'll have a day. I mean, hasn't been anybody that's been able to block him one-on-one. So I'm probably looking at Ferentz probably putting one of your great tight ends over the top of him most of the game, chipping him, doubling him, and then having a running back there as well. Because if you kind of stop George, now you're talking about bringing linebackers in, and that's where I think Dallas Clark is still running from his game he had back in 2002, 2003, from the wide open, because we had to send linebackers and he's just running free. And so,
George Karlaftis is going to be one of those guys that's playing on Sunday. He's rated to be in the top of the pick or not the top pick in the NFL draft, but he's going to be in those top couple rounds for the NFL draft, just like Tyler Linderbaum. So that'll be an interesting matchup, those guys seeing each other. That'll be something that they maybe look back on in a few years when they're in the NFL. Mm-hmm. What else about this Purdue team, guys? Or should we go straight to some little Dylan's keys to victory?
That's what I think. It's about a perfect transition, talking a little bit about that. And really, before we touch too much into that, Jed, I like to hold myself accountable. So we want to touch on my keys to victory that I claimed for Penn State the week prior. So offensively, I said we needed to establish the run, mainly because the Penn State run defense wasn't that great, and extend drives through the air. And by God, did the Hawkeyes do that? I know Spencer Petrus's numbers didn't look pretty necessarily throwing the ball, but I think on that one interception he had was a tip pass off Nico Regani's hand. So I don't necessarily fully fault him for that. Goodson as well had a good game, 25 carries for 88 yards, along with Ivory Kelly Martin. So they did the job running the football, playing excellent defense and extending drives through the air. So I give myself a win there. Defensively, bend but do not break. Let them kick field goals all day long. In the first half, they were not successful doing that. Obviously gave up a couple quick touchdowns there, but throughout the game, they didn't come out and hang their heads. They didn't quit. They kept after them, and that defense in the second half was absolutely lights out, holding them to only a field goal. So awesome to see. And then obviously talking about I accidentally skipped into my keys to victory versus Purdue there, but they also did those things. So versus Penn State, I said we needed to limit big plays, contain Sean Clifford, and cover Jahan Dotson like a hawk. So, yeah, they did all those things, and that's why the defense excelled primarily in the second half. And then special teams, I said it was going to be a field position battle between two excellent punters, and I think it's safe to say that Torrey Taylor won that battle primarily because of the positions that the defense put him in. It was constantly Torrey Taylor pinning those guys back, and that Penn State punter whose name escapes me right now, but him punting out of the back of his own end zone.
It wasn't Stout, was it?
Yeah, stout. Thank you. And, I don't care how good of a punter you are, when you're kicking out of the back of your end zone, kicking it to the 50 is considered an amazing punt, and that's still excellent field position for any offense. So, I think the defense helped Torrey Taylor out quite a bit as well in that field position battle, which brings us in to the keys to victory versus Purdue. So offensively, we need to once again establish the run game. Purdue's got a good defense, and this is going to be another week where the play action pass will absolutely work wonders. Looking at the film, of the big plays Purdue does give up, it seems like quite a few of those have came from similar play action type scenarios. So I think the play action is going to be our friend again this week. But I want to see Tyler Goodson run the ball quite a bit. So defensively, bend but don't break. Let them kick field goals all day long. Jed talked about it there a little bit. And the Purdue offense can move the ball. There's no question about that. They can get first downs. Where they're having trouble so far this year is getting into the end zone. And versus a team like Iowa, versus a defense like Iowa, I think they need to continue to make that difficult for them and let them kick field goals all day long and, see if they can do it and see if Iowa can continue outscoring them. And then special teams, once again, that field position battle. If our defense can continue to get us set up and put into good positions offensively, and we can get the ball in the end zone a few times, this game could potentially get ugly quick, which is what us home Iowa fans would like to see after, 3 out of the last 4 going Purdue's way. So that's what I got. Jed, you want to go ahead and give me some of your keys to victory for Purdue?
So I think on the offensive side of the ball, you're obviously looking at, how involved can Purdue get David Bell? If David Bell can again have a 100-yard receiving game, which kind of seems like he can kind of get there. I think he's got 13 of the 19 games he's played, and he's over 100 yards in his career. If he can get 100 yards or more, and he can get multiple touchdowns, Purdue's got a shot on the offensive end. And obviously, then who's playing quarterback? Whoever's playing quarterback has got to be able to push the ball downfield. Iowa doesn't give up many big time plays. For the last couple of years, 2017, you had the Anthony Mahugo game where he went crazy.
Oh God!
You had 2018 where you had Terry Wright. Terry Wright went crazy, and then David Bell's kind of gone crazy. So, I kind of assume David Bell will be that guy again. On the defensive side, it kind of starts and stops there with stopping the run, which has been Purdue's strength. If you can make Spencer Petras, if you can make him, I think that's kind of Purdue's plan, to make him beat you. I'm not sure Iowa's got the playmakers on the outside that they have in the past, and I'm not sure they have the tight ends, obviously, that they've had in the past. And Purdue's finally got some guys there at cornerback, although they are missing Corey Trice this year, or this game after he blew his knee out in practice. They've got some really good defensive backs, some good cornerbacks, and they've got a guy in Jalen Graham who, against Notre Dame, held Notre Dame's tight end there, 1 catch for 5 yards. So, I think on the defensive side of the ball, you gotta stop the run first and foremost. And special teams wise, we can't be having 30 and 25-yard punts. Jack Ansel has done a pretty good job, but pretty much similar keys to the game that you kind of just talked about, Dylan, right? Hit some big plays to your wide receivers, stop the run, and then make sure that your special teams are solid. And I'm going to look at Jack Ansel. If he can flip the field and kind of pin Iowa back and let that defense kind of pin their ears back a little bit, maybe Purdue will be able to get some turnovers, which they have been terrible at so far this year.
I really want to echo that too. I think that Purdue's defense, we're going to see a ton of blitzes, and I don't think it's just going to come from the linebackers. I think we're going to see a lot of corner and safety blitzes too, to get Petras on his feet and moving around. Because as we've seen, even last week against Penn State, I think they blitzed about 80 to 90% as opposed to what we had planned for in 50%. So I think that Purdue is going to do the best that they can to make, as you said, Spencer Petras beat us, as you're going to continue to, go and do a ton of blitzing. Now on the Iowa defense, we just found out that Riley Moss is going to be out this week. Second half of that game, we saw scary Terry Roberts come in, special teams hero. Now he's playing that cornerback slot. Dill, I want your take on this. What's that going to mean with having Terry come in, make his first official start at cornerback, as opposed to just playing special teams and being a second stringer coming in to rotate in with Riley Moss.
Oh, he's going to be absolutely fine. I think a lot of the people listening listen to the Kirk Ferentz presser. The coaches consider him a starter. Like they treat him as a starter. He goes into games like a starter. There's a reason he's an absolute special teams pro. It's because he's a starter. And if he didn't have, 2 All-American cornerbacks in front of him, he would be starting every single game. He'd be starting every single game at, probably 12 of the 14 Big Ten schools. So I'm not worried about that. I mean, you saw him single-handedly shut down Jahan Dotson in the second half of the Iowa game last week, and I am not worried about that whatsoever. Now, that being said, I know Jed touched on it a little bit as well, because Purdue, it never seems like it's going to be the guy you think it is that just absolutely torches Iowa. Because, he started naming names, and you guys heard me go through my little spout of PTSD there, not making fun of it, I swear, but it was legit. And being at both of those games and seeing that unfold, these Purdue wide receivers that before that day you had never heard of just absolutely go off. And so, I know we were talking a little bit before, and he's dealt with a little bit of injury issues, but the one guy I'm kind of keeping my eyes on is that Milton Wright. And so you were saying, Jed, is he full go? Is he questionable?
Yeah, Milton Wright is good to go. He's a big time. He's a big time recruit, 4-star out of that Louisville area from where the Brahms are. And he's had a case of the drops a little bit earlier in the year. It seems like he's kind of figured it out now. But he's one of those guys that if he's on and he can provide that number 2 option, now you can't really roll coverage over to David Bell. No offense to your backup quarterback. I'll take David Bell at 6'3" and 200 pounds in a jump ball over a guy that's 5'10".
And for the record, guys, for you guys watching, Milton Wright, number 0 at receiver, 6'3", 195.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The dude is massive. And when you watch the film, in the first 6 games of Purdue season, he jumps out. Like, obviously, David Bell is David Bell. I feel like I underappreciate him a little bit, but I had no idea who Milton Wright was before watching that film, and had to eventually Google it, number 0 for Purdue. And it's like, oh shit, here we go. We got, the number 2 wide receivers just getting ready to torch Iowa and Kinnick again. And it's just like that. It's just that nightmare you can't get rid of. And so
I was going to say, how do you defend that? I mean, do we do the same thing we did against Penn State, just play a base D and just continue to play zone and maybe match up man to man on, certain plays, or how does Iowa defend, those 2 receivers?
I mean, the best way to defend it, Bo, I think, is staying in that 4-2-5 and keeping everything in front of you, where kind of like I talked about earlier, Iowa's bend but don't break defense. Similar to Bobby Diaco, former Hawkeye, terrible coach. We don't claim him in the coaching world, but we claim him as a player, great player. That being said, you sit back in coverage, let Bell and Milton are going to get their catches. They're studs. It's going to happen. You got to keep it in front of you, and you got to prevent the big play, because eventually they're going to be down in the red zone where those throwing lanes are going to be shorter. And that's look at the first drive Penn State had last week. Or not the first drive, because that was a pick on the opposite side. But nonetheless, you trust that secondary where guys all over the place are getting turnovers. If you just sit back in zone, and I said it, and I feel like our Penn State guests kind of laughed at me a little bit last week for saying it, but literally that's what Iowa defense, their bread and butter has been all year. Just sit back and, wait for O'Connell, wait for Plummer, wait for whoever's manning the quarterback helm to wait for him to make a mistake. It's going to happen. And guess what? We're going to be right here, exactly where we're going to be, but you're going to make that one mistake, and Iowa's going to make you pay for it. So that's what they're going to have to do. And when they don't get those turnovers, let Purdue kick field goals all day and see what our offense can do.
Perfect. Well, that brings us right into our next segment, you guys. I wanted to talk about this because we're getting close to prediction time. But before we get to predictions, we want to talk about some hot takes for this upcoming game, just to kind of wet the palate here. And I don't know, Bo, you want to go ahead and start us off? What are your hot takes for this Saturday's matchup?
Yeah, so this is going to be out of left field, you guys, and you're going to probably laugh at me for this, but third down efficiency. Just want to let you know, I did some research prior to this. Iowa is at 36% for the year, 32 of 88 on third down efficiency. Our offense needs to step it the fuck up. What I'm going to say is that Iowa is going to have 75% or higher this week on third down efficiencies. I think that, yeah, I see your face, Jed. It's crazy, but I think Iowa is going to go nuts on third down. Because here's the thing. I think Iowa's going to do good enough on first and second down to make it a manageable third down. And I think that we honestly see a lot more of Petrus tucking and running like Nate Stanley did the last couple of years prior to him graduating and converting more on third down to get that percentage up. So hot take here, I think Iowa's going to convert 75% on their third downs this weekend.
Just so you know, Jed, Bo so far this year has been the king of the lukewarm takes. So,
and this is the hottest take.
That is a hot take.
That's
coming
boiling.
Bo. I love it. That is boiling over the pan. Like, oh my Lanta, I love it. I love it. That makes me want to go even hotter with my take. So I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
My original hot take was gonna be Tyrone Tracy. He's been quiet. He's been a hell of a team player. You know, he's obviously they're spreading the ball around. They got a lot of playmakers. This is his game. This is his game. I'm going 3 TDs. I was gonna go 2. I thought that was pretty hot. I'm going hotter. I think he gets 3 TDs, 1 rushing, 2 receiving. Let's go. What do you got, Rob?
My hot take is I'm going to have to match you guys and try to go as hot as possible. But I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that our defense holds the Purdue offense to less than 250 yards of offense.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty solid.
That is hot. All right, Jed, what do you got? What's your hot take for Purdue coming in?
I mean, if I went with Mitchell Finneran kicking 5 field goals, I don't know if that would be a very hot take in the last couple of weeks. You know, I'll probably go ahead and say, you know, George Karlaftis is coming in with only 1.5 sacks, but he's got a bunch of hurries. You know, I'm going to go with George Karlaftis with 4 sacks on Saturday.
Like
I think he's capable of that. That's a pretty hot take considering kind of what he's coming in with. 4 sacks would I'll put it this way: 4 sacks would be almost as many as Purdue had the entire season last year.
Damn.
So they had 5. They had 5 last year. So 4 in one game would be something. Would be something to see.
And you know, that is a hot take, but you're going to have Karlaftis going up against a couple of young tackles. So
yep,
that's one of those things where it could happen. You know, obviously, I think, or if nothing else, you know, they're going to have to double him up and, you know, bring a guard over, bring a tight end over to come get them. You might open up some lanes up the middle too. So there's definitely going to be some instances where I see Petrus running for his life a little bit. So no, I like that. That's a good hot take. And I think that brings us right into predictions. So Rob, what's that betting line look like?
Perfect segue. Let me set the table for our predictions, guys, to kind of put you in the ballpark of what we're looking at. Everyone listening right now, degenerates, I'm talking to you. We're looking at the betting lines. If you're in a state that can sport bet, you know, put your money down and take a look at this game this Saturday. So Purdue's going to be playing in Kinnick at number 2 currently ranked Iowa. The spread right now is minus 11.5. For Iowa. The over-under points total on this particular game right now, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, is 43, which is actually, interestingly, 2.5 points more than the Iowa-Penn State game last week, also in Kinnick. And then the money line for Iowa is minus 490 if you want to take a money line. Purdue is plus 360 right now. Interesting things to note there. So that'll lead me straight into my prediction. So I last week thought it was going to be a defensive struggle, and it looked like it was going to. Well, it did hit the over. And then shout out to some friends of ours that we work with. They actually went against my advice because I thought it was going to be the under, and they won on the over last week on the Iowa Penn State game. So props to you guys for going against my predictions. But I don't think it's going to happen too often, guys. So I think I'm actually going to say that this game does hit the under. I know it's got the makings to be a defensive battle. Iowa's defense obviously is critically acclaimed, you know, as they say, and also you got this Purdue defense is, according to Jed and according to what we're hearing and looking at on paper, that this defense is one of the best defenses in the country, led by one of the best defensive ends in the country. So something to look at there, guys. It could be a struggle there on the defensive side. It may not be a great game to sit down and watch. It could be a little bit boring, but overall, my prediction for this game is going to be Iowa wins 23-17.
That's a good pick. I'll go next. So I have been battling with this a lot because I know that these Purdue-Iowa games are always close, even though every year it's supposed to be a big time, just say blowout or a massive sway either way. Every game is close. So at first I looked at it, I said, okay, 26-9, maybe. No. I'm taking the spread. I'm taking the over. I got Iowa winning 31-16. I think that we're going to see Purdue kick a few more field goals than they actually are going to score in touchdowns. I think that O'Connell's going to start. I think Plummer's going to come in, and then when we talk about that third string quarterback, I think we're going to see him even a couple plays this week too. And I think Iowa's defense is going to be ready for all three. They're going to shut them down the best they can. This touchdown is going to actually be scored by Purdue in late minutes, letting our second string get in there. And I think Iowa ends up putting up 31 good points to beat this good Purdue team.
Okay. Well, guys, when I think about my prediction, I go a little back and forth as well. Historically, Iowa against the spread, they don't do well covering. Obviously, all year they've been struggling to hit the over as well. So, all this game has all the makings of Purdue winning that spread and staying under the 43-point mark, but not so fast, my friends. The Hawkeyes are going to win this one 34-13, and that's both hitting the over due to Iowa being 5-1 against the spread so far this year. Doing my best Lee Corso impersonation. Once again, not so fast, my friends. The Hawks take this one, and they win handily. No hangover this week. No Penn State hangover. The boys are going to be ready to play. Jed, what do you got for a prediction, my good man?
Well, I'm kind of looking at some past scores here for the last couple of weeks for you guys. Obviously, your high water mark there against a pretty, I think everybody kind of considers a pretty awful Maryland defense, 51. And Purdue's looking at, they haven't really given up more than 27, and that was Notre Dame, probably the best team that they've played. Oregon State's probably might be honestly the best team that they've played so far. I'm probably going to go with I'll go with Iowa 30, Purdue 27.
Oh, I like it. A nail biter at Kinnick.
Yeah. Yep.
They always seem to be. So I don't hate that prediction, Jed.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Just not quite enough there. O'Connell's been kind of known to throw some picks. He's got a bunch of them in this couple of games that he's played. So, I think he'll probably try to drive him down, and I think he'll probably have two costly interceptions there in the fourth quarter.
Gotcha. And then real quick before we do wrap this up, because we're not going to have time to finish up our mailbag, but one I just had to ask real quick, and I want everybody to give their quick opinion on. So Metal Morgan wants to know, guys, who had the better collegiate career, Drew Brees or Drew Tate?
Really?
Jed, go for it.
Jed, do you even remember who Drew Tate is?
Yes. A very fine quarterback for the University of Iowa. But you're looking at Drew Brees is, probably, the poster child for the cradle of quarterbacks at Purdue University. Obviously went on to have a wonderful NFL career, but Drew Brees, you're probably looking at probably one of the top 15 or 20 college quarterbacks of all time. Pretty much shattered every single Big Ten record at the time, still holds a couple of them, still holds, a couple NCAA records as well, threw the ball 80 times against Wisconsin. Surprised the arm didn't fall off after that game, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure in the last, 25, 30 years, you can point to a better quarterback in the Big Ten than Drew Brees.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I think this question was probably brought up somewhat in jest, but you might be able to make the argument that maybe single season 2004 was better, but I think Drew Tate kind of fell off at the end of his career and is still known for, the catch to win the
That was
LSU.
the Gator Bowl, right? The Gator Bowl.
Capital One Bowl. Capital
Capital
One
One
Bowl.
Bowl. That's right.
Knocked out Nick Saban before he ran off to Miami.
Hey, if we're talking about knocking off Nick Saban, Joe Tiller's undefeated against Nick Saban. Joe Tiller was undefeated. Yeah, had his number.
Yep.
Some interesting stats here from Drew Brees, just to throw it out there. He, in his college career, he set 2 NCAA records, 13 Big Ten conference records, 19 Purdue records. He left Purdue with Big Ten conference records in passing yards with 11,792, 90 touchdown passes. Total offensive yards was over 12,000, 1,026 completions, and attempts was 1,678. He actually has a tied in NCAA record with a 99-yard pass to Vinny Sutherland against Northwestern in 99.
And then probably got flagged for bowling up 65 yards of it.
He threw for his first year starting at Purdue in 98. He threw for 39 touchdowns and 20 picks. Just
he was a turnover
slinging
machine his sophomore year. Yeah, he was slinging it. Yep.
Heck yeah. So yeah, I think we all agree Drew Tate had the better career. Let's go Hawks.
I think we got time for another mailbag question, Bill, if you want to throw another one out there.
All right, real quick here. And then PNW Hawk wanted to know, and this would be a question probably for Jed too, but what areas of Purdue's defense will the Iowa offense look to exploit? And just from my quick watching of film, as Jed alluded to, it seems like their run defense for the most part has been pretty stout. I definitely think, where they're going to be able to expose them a little bit is, having, even a moderate amount of success in the running game and going back to that play action pass and quick hitters and just moving the ball down the field. I guess, what do you think, Jed?
Yeah, if you go back and look at the Notre Dame game and the Minnesota game, Purdue is definitely susceptible to the big play. That's one thing that Jeff Brom, was kind of tired of with Bob Diaco last year, was kind of the death by 1,000 pencil pokes last year. And so he's kind of saying, like, hey, if we give up the big play, that's fine, but, we got to make some big plays. So I think that kind of lends itself to Purdue giving up a big play. They'll be down. Their big time starting cornerback will play in the NFL, 6'3", 225-pound cornerback. But we've got a transfer from Kentucky, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he's at cornerback. He's filled in very nicely the last couple of weeks. So we'll see how they go from there. I think they're probably susceptible to that big play. If Purdue can stop that big play and make Iowa kind of grind out a game, I see it being a close game. But
Chris Jefferson, maybe?
Yes.
I've just got their depth chart pulled up and trying to look at him.
Yeah, he's done really, really well in place of Corey Trice. Dedrick Mackey kind of took a step forward in this new system, but both of them have kind of been susceptible. I know Chris Ottman-Bell caught one over Jefferson for a 44-yard touchdown. And then Minnesota, one of their slot wide receivers had a couple big catches. I think 2 or 3 catches for about 100. I think he might have had like 110 yards on 2 catches at one point.
Yeah.
So limiting that big play is kind of what I think will kind of determine the game for Purdue.
It'll be tough. It'll be tough for them out there. Hopefully, Purdue, or I'm saying hopefully Spencer Petras has the poise in the pocket to be able to make the throws that he needs to do. That's, I think, been one of the things that he's sort of struggled with a little bit. He's gotten better with it over this last 12 game winning streak that he's been on. But if you looked at the game against Purdue last year, that was prior to our 12-game winning streak. That actually might be the last loss that we had.
It was. No. You guys lost week 2. You guys lost back to back. You lost. Yeah, you guys for whatever reason lost to Purdue in the Northwestern, and then kind of turned it on. Those are inexplicable losses. So
that'll be
we don't want to talk. We're not here to talk about the past. Little Mark McGuire for you. Not here to talk about the past. Just here to talk about the future. Thank you.
Well, it's going to be a great game, and Jed, it's been great having you on the podcast. You've been super knowledgeable. It's been great. Any
Absolutely,
final
man. Hey,
words,
thank you.
guys, before we take this thing out?
I don't think so. Hey, I think, obviously for those of you that are going to be out, stop out to the Myrtle tailgate and, come see your Hawkeyes and Tallboys friends. I know I'll be there, and hopefully I can drag these two along as well, and we'll have some beers and have some good times. So, Jed, again, really appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. You knew a lot, and we really appreciate it. So we learned a ton, and hopefully you learned a little something too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thanks, man.
We're going to go ahead and take this out like we always do, Jed, with a little Iowa victory polka. This is what we play after every victory. So hopefully we'll hear this on Saturday. Thanks.